So let's get started. So, good afternoon. My name's Luke Johnson. I'm the author of the Public Sphere Substack. I'm pleased to welcome journalist Kenneth R. Rosen to today's live show. He's the author of a new book, Polar War, Submarines, Spies, and the Struggle for Power in a Melting Arctic. For the book, Rosen traveled across the Arctic to report on how the region has suddenly become a hotbed of great power competition between the US, Russia, and China. He also reported on the consequences of climate change there and the relationship between great power competition and a warming planet. Rosen's writing has appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Times, the Atlantic, Wired, and he's reported from Syria, Iraq, and Ukraine. Welcome, Kenneth.
Hey,
I
Luke.
want to get to the book, but first I want to start with breaking news. Over the weekend, the U.S. ousted Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, and in subsequent days, Trump and top officials have ramped up their rhetoric about taking Greenland. What do you make of this? Is it a joke, a negotiating position, or should we be taking it seriously?
I think at this point, President Trump has always followed up on what he said. This is a hangover from the first Trump administration when Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was even talking about the need to secure the Arctic militarily, as far as defense goes. So now with the second Trump administration, it seems like he's doubling down on that. And as a lame duck president, it seems as though he's just going all in on everything that he didn't get to do in his first term. And one of those things is acquiring Greenland. Now, the breaking news on the subject of Greenland last night was that it came out that during the briefing of the Venezuela raid, senators and congressional leaders were briefed on the notion that Trump is now thinking about purchasing Greenland in some fashion, maybe not putting boots on the ground, but buying it outright from the Kingdom of Denmark, which for your viewers and listeners is the nation that oversees the administration of Greenland.
Okay, so about the book, can you explain the reporting that you did for this book? Where did you go, and what are some things that you learned about the region that outsiders might not know?
So it started out as a magazine assignment for Politico magazine. They sent me to a small archipelago in the Arctic Ocean called Svalbard. It's a small collection of islands administered by Norway. And they sent me to understand how climate change was impacting national security concerns across Europe, but then also in the States. I took that magazine article and decided to go broader. I wanted to understand how climate change is creating a great power competition in the Arctic. And to understand more closely what that looked like on the ground, I traveled through all the Arctic states except for Russia. I did visit a Russian territory in the Arctic, but not Russia proper, the mainland of Russia. Sort of traveling west to east, or excuse me, east to west, going from Finland to Sweden to Norway, Iceland, Greenland, Canada, and then finally the American Arctic territory, which is, of course, the state of Alaska. And what surprised me the most was how determined the Nordic states and the Scandinavian countries were to increase their defenses post Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and how their military budgets were surging, not only because of
So
President
you're
Trump's
talking about
desire.
Sweden and Norway
I'm
specifically,
talking
or
about Scandinavia writ large.
okay,
Also Norway, Finland, and Sweden, including
okay,
Denmark, counts itself among those,
okay,
increasing their defense spending in order to prepare for
right,
what they saw was a coming war in the Arctic.
right. Okay, so these countries and people them were strongly in favor of increasing defense spending after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. How did they feel about Trump's threats towards the region? I realize that some of the reporting was probably done, before Trump took office for the second time. But did you talk to them about that?
Yeah, a lot of those nations were worried about Trump taking office again. So those were discussions that we were having, and they had noted that President Trump wanted to increase the spending for NATO countries by from 2.5% to 5%, something in that range. And the reporting, I should say, the reporting for the book, we were making edits up until September, knowing that
Okay.
Trump was taking office and it was likely going to be another Trump administration.
Okay, so September 2025, 20.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, okay,
25.
got it. Got it. So let's talk about these great powers individually and what do they want out of the Arctic? Start like Russia. What does Russia want out of the Arctic?
So Russia's the largest stakeholder in the Arctic, right? Most of its country is underlaid by permafrost. Most of its country mainland is placed above the Arctic Circle. It has the largest Arctic Ocean coastline, and for them, they see the opening of the Northern Sea Route, which is a pathway from East Asia to Europe across their
Right.
Arctic territory. So with the ice melting in the north, more regularly over the summers. It used to be that there was a lot of ice up there, but now it's shrinking in the summer. And some scientists are saying that by 2030, there won't be any ice up there. So it'll be more
Okay.
navigable for these commercial vessels. So Russia is putting more infrastructure along its coastline to support liquid natural gas facilities, to support commercial fishing boats, commercial fishing boats, commercial transportation vessels, and China is helping them do that.
With money, with people, with both, or
Yeah, it's just sort of the normal Chinese playbook where you supply funding and then also personnel to be able to carry out the projects to build liquid natural gas
okay.
facilities and also ports, right? I mean, they need ports and
Right.
security vessels up there in order to support boats that might get stranded or boats that need help along the way getting through the ice that is still there.
I see. And what is this China? Is China okay just with assisting Russia on its quest to dominate the Arctic, or do they have other goals?
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't they be thrilled? I mean, they're not an Arctic country. Russia's an Arctic
I
country,
see.
but they have a friend that's an Arctic country. But I always try to remind people that Russia is obviously aware of the threat of China being
Yeah.
involved in its sphere of influence. So while they are helping, Russia's trying to keep China at bay and say, like, look, this is still uh, our route, our country.
Right. And viewers should know that China has a massively larger economy than Russia, and it has a lot more leverage, arguably, over Russia than vice versa.
Well, to say
Uh,
nothing of its history in Africa, right? I mean,
right.
the way it has junk bonds, junk loans out to countries that put them into debt for years and years. I mean, there's a long-standing history tradition of China meddling in countries' finances and projects for the long term. So I think Russia is keenly aware of that tactic as well.
Okay. So what about the United States? What do they want beyond sort of Trump's bellicose rhetoric?
So while I was traveling across the circumpolar north, it became clear to me that these Scandinavian nations and other Arctic powers were really doubling down on trying to figure out what comes next in the Arctic, how to develop the Arctic, and how to secure the Arctic. And when I spent time with American forces, the U.S. Coast Guard, the 11th Airborne Division based out of Alaska, it became clear to me that there wasn't the same desire to jump on that bandwagon, or maybe there wasn't that bandwidth, right? We've had a long standing difficulty building icebreakers in this country. Um, a lot of our troops are just not trained for Arctic warfare because we've spent 20 years fighting in the Middle East and are focusing somewhat now on the Pacific with the threat from China. So what America wants is unclear. I mean, with Trump taking office, it seems like his primary focus is opening up Alaska for extractive industries and taking over Greenland. The whole Greenland discussion is a fascinating one, and we could spend the rest of the time talking about that one. But his primary concerns are two. One, that he says that there are Russian and Chinese vessels all around Greenland, and we need all the rare earth minerals from Greenland. I don't know which branch you want to take in the discussion, whether it's the vessels or
Whatever
the
you want, you want. Like, yeah.
there are no Chinese or Russian vessels. I've circumnavigated Greenland while reporting the book, and it's just not true. There are more Russian and Chinese military vessels um, running along the coastline of Alaska than there are in Greenland. As far as the extractive industries go in Greenland, there's certainly potential. It's just not going to happen overnight, and it's extremely
Right.
expensive. and
Right.
it's extremely difficult to be able to mine anything out of Greenland. So it's not realistic.
Right.
Another thing that I forget to
We're
mention
talking
is
about
that
these rare earths, which China has like a lot of the production of, and which are important for
right
batteries and
for batteries, for
various
solar power,
weapon systems and solar power and things like that.
for computer chips, for
Yeah,
silicone. I mean, Greenland has silicone. It's got cobalt. It's got nickel. It's got everything that we have in transistors for computers. Um, but it's just not, it's not
right.
something that you could just set up a mine and hope to make money in 20 years. It's a half century project, not a half decade project. Um,
Okay.
and
So
also,
it's
are
even
you
longer
familiar?
than like the 10 years that people are talking about rare earths. Like this is a 50-year project.
Yeah, like when they set up the Red Dog mine in Alaska to mine there, that's they know they're going to lose money in the first 20 years.
I
After that,
see.
they're going to make money. That's how mines work. But in Greenland, that's the time frame is much longer.
I see. Because of the climate or because of something else?
There's a very short summer season when there's light and it's possible to get things in and out of the country.
I see.
It's also twice, 2.5 times the size of Texas, with only
Right.
100 miles of road, which is already a challenge for the people living there and for having any sort of industry. But then to say we're going to go into central Greenland or the northeastern coast of Greenland, I'm looking at a map right here, northeastern
Right.
coast
Right.
of Greenland. Uh, how are you going to get? You need planes, you need helicopters, you need boats that can break ice, you need way more infrastructure that isn't already there.
Right. Right. So how is climate change affecting the Arctic and in your trips there, what did you notice?
But there are communities that are heavily impacted by climate change. There are more and more so-called 100-year storms that are devastating communities. To put that in perspective, there are these coastal indigenous communities that had relied on the ice to protect them from weather systems that would come in. Now, with the ice dissipating, those storms can easily bring water from the ocean and sea up onto their communities and wipe them away. Um, Furthermore, when it's getting 4 times hotter than the rest of the world, so the Arctic is warming at a rate 4.5 times faster than the lower latitudes, and that's destabilizing the permafrost that underlays a lot of the buildings and
Yeah.
infrastructure that is there now. So a lot of countries are trying to figure out, well, what do we do to either shore these up or move them elsewhere or create technology that can save what already exists.
So when permafrost melts, it's
Thaws, thaws.
thaws. Like
Melts
what?
implies that it goes away forever, but we don't. We
Right.
don't. It hasn't
Right.
gone away
Right.
forever yet. Yeah.
So how is that damaging to a community?
Well, it's communities are built upon it. I
Right.
went out. I went to Fairbanks, and they have these things called thermocross. I'm going to butcher that name. It's easier to be a writer because you can write it out. You don't have to pronounce it.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
and all around Fairbanks, if you take the Dalton Highway, which is the one highway leading up to Purdue Bay, where the
This is
oil
just like a
extraction is
dirt
in Montana.
road, right? And there's like
Yeah,
no
it's an
services on it. Yeah.
ice highway kind of.
Right.
There are just divots, massive, I mean, like craters that are forming because the permafrost is melting, thawing, and making the infrastructure on top of it, the dirt road or the cement and concrete and asphalt disappear. So this is happening all around Fairbanks, even near the city itself.
Okay. And this so you traveled the whole length of this dirt road or
For when I was in Alaska, I traveled the almost the full length of the Dalton Highway. I
right.
didn't go the last 40 miles, in part because once you get to Purdue Bay, it's a restricted area. It's very
I see.
secure. But I visited a research station that was just shy of that.
But there's like no services on this road, like very little gas and were you
There's
doing
one
this
place
like in
in
a
Coldfoot.
truck or like with a
Yeah,
team or yeah.
I was with the Tulik Research Station's team. They have a
Okay.
modified Ford pickup truck that has an extra gas tank welded onto it.
Yeah.
There's one stop in Coldfoot to refill, but other than that, you're on your own.
Okay. So it's pretty dicey. Um okay. So this climate change, it was striking to me that you said like 4.5 times more than I guess where we live, sort of in Northern Europe or Northern United States, because I can see it here, like from when I was a kid and things like that. Um,
Mhm.
so how is this climate change affecting sort of what we talked about earlier, the militarization and the great power conflict?
Well, it was once a region of stasis, right? There was a region where, oh, it's just covered in ice and it's not going to be populated. There's nothing to do. We can't drill for oil. We can't get ships up there most of the time. So we'll just cooperate on scientific research. Now, as it's opening up opportunities for people to move up in there, get more boats up there, get more people up there, consider the option of mining for rare earth minerals. And for the rest of us, we're seeing as that area warms up, literally, not figuratively, as that area warms up, we're getting in Berlin, the storm systems are getting a lot weirder. Maybe winter's coming a little bit later, or you have snowfall in April. I was in Finland in late April, early May, and they had a once in a lifetime random snowstorm, and 3 people died because it was
Hmm.
just one of those things that they weren't expecting. And the way that the Arctic is heating is also affecting Indonesia and all the rest of the world writ large. So I think where we went from cooperating on scientific research and trying to understand how our planet's affected by this global warming, now we're focused on, well, the global warming's happening. How do we benefit from it? Which is to the detriment of probably Western nations and Russia.
Right, right, and to the people living there, obviously.
Obviously, yeah.
Um, so what's like a your worst case scenario for militarization?
Well, one thing I like to characterize about the Arctic is that there's probably never, not never, but probably in our lifetime won't be a war fought in the Arctic proper, but it's a very strategic place. From the Alaskan air bases, you can reach anywhere in the world by traveling over the North Pole in about 7 hours, which is
Okay.
extraordinarily fast. So
Like
it's a
parts of China
strategic,
you're talking about in particular?
yeah,
Yeah.
over the horizon attacks from Russia. It's very
Yeah.
strategic. Another thing that many people are worried about is as people travel, more and more vessels, commercial passenger vessels, traverse the Northwest Passage in Canada that might not be rated for ice conditions. There could be an accident somewhere in a territory that is in dispute, and with that dispute could come horizontal escalation toward fighting elsewhere. So if say that boat
You
gets
mean like
stranded in
with
the
an oil
Northwest
tanker or something or anything?
oil tank,
Yeah.
or like one of the examples I've used is that a passenger vessel in Norway gets stranded, and a Russian vessel comes to help, but they don't help well enough, and people die. Then
Right.
Norway blames Russia and so then it sort of snowballs. Forgive the pun, and then
Yeah.
escalates into a conflict elsewhere, a diplomatic conflict that engages a war elsewhere.
I see. So you list in your book some ways to decrease military tensions. What might be some of them?
What a question. I don't know. How to decrease military tensions. I mean, the suggestion that I listed in the book was to create a framework for militarization of the Arctic, for a cooperative military structure in the Arctic. It's never been a discussion because primarily people wanted to keep it a region of peace. The former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev called it a zone of peace. That was his quote. Now it's more of a zone of war. So now nations are considering, well, do we need to bring that into discussion? Do we need to start talking about what is allowed and what isn't allowed as far as military operations in the high north goes?
So the cooperative military zone would say that some things, and fill in the blank here, would be off limits in a military conflict.
No, they would say, like, look, we're going to have to start talking about the military and operations in the north. Maybe we should just bar all armed vessels from traveling in the north, or maybe we don't allow certain types of infrastructure to be built in the north. No more air bases higher than
I
no more
see.
missiles being placed in certain areas, which is not something anyone wanted to talk about because they felt like, all right, well, this is a place that is
Right.
calm and collected, and we're all happy the way it is. But
Right.
that hasn't been the case since the invasion of Ukraine.
So would the analogy be something like, in the 1950s, there was a lot of testing about nuclear weapons, and in the 1962, there was a comprehensive test ban treaty that said, we're going to limit the number of countries with nuclear weapons, and limits on testing. Is that sort of the analogy you're talking about?
Yeah, like denuclearization writ large. I mean, the START treaty, right, probably a good placed a point, but that has fallen apart since then too.
Yeah.
So the reality of being able to negotiate anything today seems um, tepid at best.
Yeah. So, you have a whole chapter about sort of like outsiders and people who are coming to Greenland. Can you share a bit like of some of the sort of stranger characters that you met sort of
Which
in
wait,
your
all right, which chapter are you referring to? And also, thank you for reading the book.
Yeah, well you read you I think you encountered like somebody who you thought was a spy in a bar in northern Norway, if I'm correct. So what's the sort of spycraft, around here, around there,
Well,
up there?
Well,
Yeah.
it was in 2022 or 2023 that the U.S. State Department opened up an outpost in Tromsø in northern Norway, in
Hmm.
part because they had started to see more Russian and Chinese influence operations and intelligence operations taking place in the high north. So the U.S. had started to build up its own presence to be able to listen in on what Russia was doing. I mean, after Ukraine having cut out Russia from the Arctic Council and severed official diplomatic ties, there needs to be a way to know what's going on in the country, and the best way to do that is to be in the Arctic and close to Russia. Um, so there's a bunch of satellite relay stations that listen in on what Russian military operations are going on, um, and spycraft is the name of is the game of the day when you have borders shared with Russia. Finland shares a border with Russia. Norway shares a border with Russia, and you have defectors, so-called defectors, coming from Russia into Norway, into Finland, seeking asylum, but are also those countries are cautiously aware that they might not be asylum seekers per se. And a lot of those Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries, had exiled the diplomats who were living there for Russia, the Chinese and Russian diplomats who were living there in part because of those worries. But the book
I see.
contains a lot of that information based on FOIA requests that I filed over the last several years to get a better insight into what the U.S. thinking was up there.
Okay. Um, so what are you going to be reporting on and watching about the Arctic in the coming months?
Well, I'd be curious to see what materializes in Greenland. On the other side of the Arctic, I'm keenly worried about Trump's opening up of the Arctic refuge in Alaska for oil and mining exploration. Whether that will devastate communities or whether it will benefit them, and just to see whether or not we can maintain the status quo with the Arctic Council, which is the primary governing body for the circumpolar North.
And
Russia
this
is sort of
contains
no longer.
Norway, Sweden, a number of other countries.
It
Yeah.
contains all eight Arctic powers, and then a myriad of observer states, one of which is China.
And I was like, last question, one more question about Greenland. I was thinking about this like this morning, and I couldn't really wrap my head around it. I mean, can you imagine even the US invading Greenland? Like I'm wondering with like troops with guns, like I don't think the Greenlanders would do you think they would shoot? Like I'm just kind of thinking about this and I can't really get an answer in my head, you know?
I don't know. I don't know what it would look like, but all the Greenlanders and the Inuit people that I spoke with while I was traveling there are more or less happy with the status quo.
Yeah,
They receive some $500 billion a year annually, about $10,000 per resident from the Danish government in order to
right,
sustain their economy. And they'd like to move more into tourism and fishing as part of their economy. They don't have any interest in wanting to be taken over by anyone else. They're not for sale, as they keep saying. But
yeah,
also, as far as defense goes, we don't need boots on the ground. We have Pacific Space Base. We, being the Americans, have Pacific
right,
Space Base. We already have a strategic location there. Why rock the boat? There's nothing more that we can gain now.
right.
Only the dissolution of our treaties with the people who matter the most in the North, which are our allies.
Right. Okay. Well, do you want to show the book again? It's
I don't know. You
Polar.
said my face wasn't centered properly.
Okay.
Is that
So it's
good?
Polar War, Submarine Spies, Struggle for the Power, and the Melting Arctic. Well, thank you
And
so much.
it's wait. Can I plug something else?
Yeah, plug something else.
All right, so it's got this picture I took myself. It's a really cool picture
Okay.
on the back, and there's two hidden gems within the book if you can find them. There's a reindeer sausage recipe, and there's a hidden chapter on a whale that
Okay.
was recruited as a Russian spy. So
Okay.
let's see if you can
Okay.
find it.
Okay. So come for the geopolitical discussion and stay for the reindeer sausage recipe.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much for talking to me today.
Thanks, Luke. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.